Have you ever reached for your phone before your feet even touched the floor? No decision, no thought. Just a hand moving on its own. And you might wonder when that quietly became part of you. Here's the strange part. Most of us can't name the day we became who we are now. There was no announcement, no turning point that felt like one at the time. We just look up one day, and we're already someone. Because who you become may have less to do with your big decisions and more to do with the tiny ones. The kind so small they never felt like choices at all. The kind you'd forget by lunch. Think about the seat you always take. The same route home, the sentence you swallow instead of saying out loud. None of it feels important until you've done it a few hundred times. Most of us are waiting for a moment that changes everything. Something big enough to notice. Something that feels like a real decision. Meanwhile, the small ones keep happening in the background. But quiet doesn't mean unimportant. These choices aren't small, they're just easy to overlook while you're living them. And they add up in a direction you didn't consciously pick. So where do the first ones come from? Long before you were paying attention, something was already teaching you what to reach for. And that's usually where this story starts. Most of your earliest choices were made before you knew you were choosing anything. You were young, you were watching, you were figuring out how your world worked. So you adjusted, without ever calling it a choice. For some kids, staying quiet is what keeps a room calm. So they get quiet, not once, but again, and again, and again, until quiet stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like who they are. Here's what may be happening. Every environment responds warmly to some behaviors and not others. And repetition can turn a response into a setting. Something that just runs without asking you first. Think about the kid who was always the helpful one. 20 years later, they're the adult who says yes before hearing the full question. They don't notice the reflex. It's been running longer than they can remember. It's tempting to look for one big moment that explains all of it. A single memory to blame. But for many people, it's thousands of unremarkable days stacked quietly on top of each other. And these old defaults weren't flaws. They were solutions. They worked back when you needed them to. Understanding that doesn't excuse anything. It just makes it easier to look at. But something shifts along the way. What used to happen around you slowly starts running inside you on its own, and nobody has to be in the room anymore. Have you noticed that some choices seem to happen before you decide anything? There's no debate, no weighing of options, no pause you can point to. You're just already doing the thing. It's that quiet feeling of, I just did it. The hand in the snack drawer, the thumb on the app, the yes that left your mouth a full second before you agreed with it. Here's a simple way to think about it. When you repeat a choice, your mind may start building a shortcut for it. Each time, it takes a little less effort and a little less thinking. It's a bit like a path worn across grass. The first walk was a decision. Someone chose that line. The 100th walk isn't a decision at all. By then, the path is simply there. People often call this laziness, weak willpower, a character problem. But it may be your mind doing exactly what it was built to do, saving effort wherever it can find some. So shortcuts aren't the enemy here. You need most of them. Life would be exhausting without them. The more useful question is, which ones have you quietly been building? And these shortcuts don't stay inside your head. They walk out the door with you into completely ordinary days, which is where you'd actually see them if you were looking. Here's something strange about an ordinary Tuesday. It may shape you more than any major decision you've ever made. Nothing happens, and everything is quietly being decided. Think about work. The meeting where you stayed quiet. The idea you backed, or didn't. The email you softened one more time. None of it feels big. Together, it can decide how visible you become. Friendships work the same way. Being the one who always reaches out, or the one who never quite does. Nobody chose that out loud, but over a few years, the shape sets anyway. Imagine saying next time to an invitation, then next time again, and once more because the week was heavy. Months later, the invitations have stopped. No argument, no falling out. And the first instinct is usually to blame something else. They changed. It was bad timing. People just drift. which can be true, and still miss the pile of tiny opt-outs underneath. So here's a smaller, more useful place to look. Pick one area of your life. Find one choice you keep repeating there. That usually tells you more than reviewing your entire history. But because these moments are so small, they're incredibly easy to misread. And the way people misread them can create a whole new problem. That part's worth slowing down for. Here's what usually happens once people realize small choices matter. They start watching every single one. And what started as awareness turns into a running score in your head. Suddenly, every little decision feels like a test. What you ate, what time you got up, whether you answered that message. A test you might be failing right now without knowing it. But that all or nothing view has a cost. Honest self-awareness quietly turns into constant self-monitoring. And that tends to drain the exact energy that change actually needs. You've probably seen this one. Someone starts a new routine, misses 2 days, and drops the whole thing. The gap stops being a gap. It becomes proof of something about them. We do it to other people too. We read their small habits like a summary of who they are. But you're only seeing the outside of a choice you know nothing about. And that's a thin thing to judge someone on. So here's a gentler way to hold all of this. Small choices describe a direction. They don't hand down a verdict, and a direction can be adjusted while you're still walking it. What actually helps here is much quieter than judgment. It's slower, smaller, honestly a little less satisfying. It doesn't feel like progress at first, and it's usually the part that lasts. Awareness tends to work better when it starts with curiosity. Not correction, not a plan, just noticing what you already do. Curiosity is a lot easier to keep up than pressure. And there's a small pause you may not have noticed. It sits right before the automatic choice. Half a second, maybe less. Most of us walk straight past it every single day. Change may not come from forcing yourself. It may come from letting that pause stretch a little longer and a little more often. That's it. That's the entire move, most of the time. Here's a small example. Someone moves their phone charger into another room and stops scrolling in bed. One change to the surroundings did what months of willpower couldn't. The instinct, though, is usually to overhaul everything. New routine, new rules, new version of you, starting Monday. But the duller, smaller adjustments are the ones that tend to survive. And you're not erasing who you were. You're just adding new small choices right next to the old ones. Then letting the balance shift, slowly, without any announcement. So it might be worth sitting with this for a second. The person you'll be in a few years is being shaped right now in choices so small they don't even feel like choices. That's not pressure, it's just how it works. We rarely become someone in a single moment. We become someone in the quiet repetition of ordinary ones. If any of this felt familiar, a like or a subscribe helps more than you'd think. And I'd like to know, what's one small choice you've noticed yourself making lately?